was one of those February days in northern Utah when the sky hangs low and the air carries a quiet chill. In the small town of Smithfield, the streets were peaceful, wrapped in the ordinary rhythm of a weekday afternoon. Kids hurried home from school, cars rolled past the frozen fields, and porch lights began to flicker on as evening crept closer. No one knew that, before nightfall, something unthinkable would happen, a moment of violence so senseless it would shake the community to its core. My name is John, and this is the story of Deserae Turner, a 14-year-old girl whose life changed forever for $55 and an iPod. Deserae was the kind of teenager who brightened any room she entered. Her teachers described her as kind and hardworking. Her friends remembered her as funny, loyal, and just a little shy. She loved horses, often spending hours at the stable brushing their coats and feeding them apples. She texted friends constantly, played music through her earbuds, and carried her iPod everywhere. Her parents trusted her, knowing she was responsible and dependable, the kind of daughter who would text if she was running late. That trust made what happened next even harder to understand. On the morning of February 16th, 2017, Deserae woke up early. There was still frost on the windows, and her mother had made breakfast before driving her to school. Nothing seemed unusual. She attended her classes at Skyview High School, chatted with friends between periods, and mentioned plans to meet someone later that day. To everyone else, it sounded harmless, just another after-school hangout like any other teenager would plan. No one could have guessed that the meeting was a trap. Two 16-year-old boys from the same school had been talking for days, plotting something they thought would make them famous. What started as a conversation between friends turned darker, twisted by boredom and a misguided sense of adventure. They spoke about robbing anyone for a bit of money, for fun, for the thrill of control. They didn't talk about consequences. They didn't think about what it would mean to another human being. It was just a game, until it wasn't. That afternoon, Deserae went to meet them near an empty canal on the edge of town. The spot was quiet, surrounded by dry reeds and patches of snow. It was the kind of place where kids sometimes went to talk or skip stones, not the kind of place where you expect evil to unfold. She thought they were meeting to trade a knife, something one of the boys had promised to sell her. She had brought $55, her iPod, and her phone. That's all she carried. The boys were waiting. One of them had a small .22 caliber pistol tucked inside his jacket. The other had convinced himself that it was just a prank, that maybe they'd scare her and run off laughing. But something inside them had already crossed a line. They led her down into the shallow canal bed, talking casually, pretending everything was fine. The wind rustled through the grass. In that moment, it must have felt like any other meeting, till one of them raised the gun. A single shot echoed across the frozen fields. Deserae fell forward, her body collapsing into the cold dirt. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then one of the boys took her belongings, her purse, her iPod. The small amount of cash smashed her phone against the ground. They believed she was dead. They turned and walked away, leaving her there, alone, in the fading light. Hours passed. The temperature dropped. The sky darkened into a blanket of stars. At home, her parents began to worry. She hadn't returned, hadn't answered her phone. They called her friends, retraced her route, and then called the police. As the search expanded, flashlights swept across snow-dusted fields, and volunteers shouted her name into the night air. Her friends refused to give up. They knew she wouldn't just disappear. Late that evening, two family friends joined the search. Their flashlights cut across the canal's edge, glinting on patches of ice. Then, one of them saw some thingy hint of color in the mud, the faint outline of a body. They rushed down and found her lying face down, motionless, her hair matted with blood. For a moment, they thought she was gone, but then she moved. Barely, but she moved. Against all odds, Deserae was still alive. The call went out immediately. Emergency crews raced to the scene, lights flashing, sirens echoing through the night. Paramedics lifted her carefully, wrapping her in blankets, rushing her to the hospital. The bullet had entered the back of her head and stopped near her right temple. Doctors didn't know if she would survive the night. Her parents, waiting in the hallway, held each other and prayed. No one could understand how a child, two teenagers, and a gun had collided in such a cruel way. When detectives arrived, They began piecing together what little evidence they had. Deserae's phone was shattered. Her purse was missing. Her iPod was gone. But her survival changed everything. Even as she lay in a coma, the investigation gained momentum. Within hours, names surfaced: classmates, boys who had texted her that day. Patterns in the messages pointed to deceit, to manipulation, the truth began to surface, one text at a time. As dawn broke over Cache County, the community awoke to the news. A 14-year-old girl, shot in the head, fighting for her life. 2 teenage suspects. A motive that made no sense. Parents hugged their children a little tighter. Teachers tried to find words that would comfort their students. And through it all, a small hospital room became a symbol of both horror and hope. A reminder that sometimes, even in the darkest night, the human will to live burns stronger than anyone expects. Morning came quietly over Smithfield. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the air as if the world itself was unaware of the horror that had unfolded the night before. At Logan Regional Hospital, doctors worked through the early hours, battling to stabilize a young girl whose heartbeat flickered between life and loss. Machines hummed. Nurses whispered. Her parents stood nearby, frozen between hope and despair. They had never imagined that their daughter, their bright, sweet Deserae, would be lying in a hospital bed with a bullet lodged in her skull. The medical team placed her in a medically induced coma to control swelling in her brain. They couldn't remove the bullet, it was too close to vital tissue. For days, her condition was critical. Her parents prayed, holding on to every sign of life, every flicker of movement in her fingers. Friends gathered outside the hospital, lighting candles, bringing posters, and writing messages of support. Across the small Utah Valley, people who had never met her spoke her name in hushed tones. The question echoed everywhere. Why? Detectives were asking that same question. They returned to the canal that morning, searching the frozen ground for clues. Footprints, shell casings, tire marks. Small detail mattered, and in a town as tight-knit as Smithfield, rumors spread fast. 2 teenage boys had been seen with her. They'd been texting her that afternoon. Detectives tracked down their names: Coulter Peterson and Jeremy Everett. At first, they denied everything, saying they hadn't met her that day. But their stories didn't match, and when police examined their phones, the truth began to unravel. Messages revealed a chilling plan. The boys had discussed getting rid of Deserae days before the shooting. One message read like a twisted dare, a test of loyalty between 2 disturbed minds. They had even bragged about how easy it would be. It wasn't about hate or revenge or galosity. It was about control, a thrill. They wanted to see if they could do it. And after the shooting, they had gone home, eaten dinner, and acted as if nothing had happened. Detectives obtained a warrant to search their homes. Inside one bedroom, they found a small caliber pistol hidden beneath a mattress. In another, they discovered a spent shell casing on the windowsill. A trophy, the boy said. Something to remember it by. It was the kind of detail that left even seasoned investigators shaken. These weren't hardened criminals. They were 16-year-old kids. But the coldness of their planning was something else entirely. As word spread, the town struggled to make sense of it. Teachers who had taught all 3 teenagers felt broken. How could 2 boys who had once laughed in their classrooms be capable of something so horrific? Parents questioned themselves, wondering what they had missed. In coffee shops and church halls, people whispered about what could drive children to such darkness. It wasn't just grief, it was disbelief. The sense that safety itself had been shattered. Back at the hospital, Deserae's body fought to survive. Days turned into weeks. Her family took turns at her bedside, reading her favorite books, playing the music she loved, hoping she could hear them. Slowly, small miracles began to appear. Her fingers twitched. Her eyes fluttered. She could squeeze her mother's hand. Doctors called it a sign, a spark of recovery. Her parents called it faith. Meanwhile, prosecutors began preparing charges. The evidence was overwhelming. Text messages, the weapon, the confession. They accused the boys of attempted aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, and obstruction of justice. In interviews, both admitted to their roles. One had fired the shot. The other had helped plan the ambush. They had taken $55, and an iPod items that now seemed so absurdly small, so meaningless compared to what they had done. The county attorney addressed the public, his voice calm but weighted with emotion. "In 18 years of service," he said, "I have never seen a case like this. Never." He looked at the cameras, at the families watching, and added, "There is no rational explanation for this act." Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras flashed. For a moment, it felt like the entire town had paused to grieve together. As Desiree's condition slowly stabilized, she was transferred to a rehabilitation center. She had survived, but the bullet had caused permanent damage. She faced partial paralysis, speech difficulties, and memory loss. But her spirit, according to everyone who met her, remained fierce. Therapists described her as determined, even joyful at times. She would smile, even when the pain was unbearable. She told her parents she wanted to walk again, to ride her horse again, to go back to school. It was a long road, but she was ready to fight for it. In those early recovery days, the community rallied around her. Local schools sold bracelets printed with her name. Fundraisers filled gymnasiums. Social media overflowed with messages of hope tagged Prive or Deserae. Her story had touched something deep, a collective reminder that violence could wound, but it could not erase humanity. Every small victory in her therapy felt like a victory for everyone who loved her. As the investigation moved toward trial, one question lingered over everything. What had gone so wrong in the minds of two teenagers that they could destroy another person's life for something so trivial? Experts were brought in to evaluate them: psychologists, behavioral analysts, attorneys. None could give an answer that made sense. Some said it was peer pressure gone to extremes. Others said it was the influence of violent games or a lack of empathy. But beneath all the theories was a truth that no one wanted to face. Sometimes evil has no clear origin. Sometimes it simply exists in small, chilling moments when someone chooses to stop caring. And as Deserae continued her slow recovery, her family decided something early on. They wouldn't let her story end in darkness. They would make sure survival meant something. They would remind people, every chance they got, that courage can exist even in the shadow of cruelty. Because Deserae, even without speaking a word yet, was already proving something extraordinary. She was tougher than a bullet. By the time spring arrived in Utah, the snow had melted from the canal banks where Deserae was found. The place looked almost peaceful again, but to those who knew what had happened there, it would never look the same. A few faded ribbons still hung on a nearby fence, reminders from the community's candlelight vigils. They fluttered softly in the wind, like quiet symbols of survival. In the hospital, Deserae was now awake, her eyes open, her body weak but alive. Doctors called her recovery miraculous, but behind that word were hours of therapy, surgeries, and pain that no one her age should ever endure. Her parents rarely left her side. They celebrated every small movement, every word she managed to form, every sign of progress. The bullet had caused severe trauma to the right side of her brain, affecting her motor skills and speech. Learning to walk again would take months. Yet, every morning, she tried. Every day, she fought. One of her therapists said later, Deserae didn't just survive, she came back fighting. The news of her survival spread quickly, turning her from a victim into a symbol of strength. Reporters visited the town, interviewing neighbors and friends. Everyone spoke about her kindness, her laughter, her love of animals. At the same time, people cold and tea stopped talking about the boys, how two kids who once shared classrooms and jokes could turn into would-be killers. The contrast was haunting. Innocence and cruelty living side by side in the same school halls. Meanwhile, investigators continued to build the case. Every digital footprint, every text message, every spoken word between the two boys was analyzed. They had met Deserae that afternoon with full intention to harm her. The plan was clear. They lured her out, told her lies brought the weapon, and carried out the attack. One boy, Coulter Peterson, confessed to pulling the trigger. The other, Jeremy Everett, helped plan it, and afterward, helped cover it up. They hid evidence, destroyed her belongings, and acted as if nothing had happened. Their casual behavior stunned everyone. It revealed a disturbing absence of remorse. As prosecutors prepared to take them to trial, the defense teams argued that they were just kids incapable of understanding the full consequences of their actions. But the prosecution disagreed. This wasn't a mistake, they said. This was a decision. And in the end, both boys were charged as adults. The courtroom would become the stage for a community's grief and anger. Before the trial began, Desiree's parents made a public statement. Standing before a row of cameras, her father's voice trembled slightly as he said, "We're not here for revenge. We're here for justice. We want people to understand what was taken from our daughter, not just her physical abilities, but her sense of safety, her childhood." His wife stood beside him, holding his hand tightly. Behind them, photos of Deserae smiled brightly, taken before that terrible day, a reminder of what was lost. Inside the courtroom, the boys appeared small, dressed in suits, their hands clasped in front of them. They didn't look like monsters. They looked like students. But as the evidence unfolded, the horror of their actions spoke louder than appearances ever could. Detectives testified about the messages exchanged between them. One text read, "It's time to get rid of her. Another side will do it today." The cold simplicity of those words filled the room with silence. Even the judge paused for a moment before continuing. Witnesses described how the boys laughed afterward, how they bragged to friends that they did it. When investigators showed the shell casing found on a bedroom windowsill, kept as a souvenir, people in the courtroom gasped. It wasn't just a crime, it was a ritual of cruelty, and for many parents watching, it shattered something inside them. They saw their own children in those defendants. They wondered how such darkness could take root in two teenage hearts. Throughout it all, Deserae was watching. She wasn't the same girl who had been attacked in that frozen canal. Her body bore scars. Her movements were slower, but her eyes carried something unbreakable. When she finally appeared in court, months later, sitting in a wheelchair, wearing a shirt that said "Happy," the entire courtroom fell silent. Reporters wrote that her presence was more powerful than any testimony. She didn't need to speak to make her point. Her survival was the evidence. The boys avoided eye contact with her as she entered. Maybe they couldn't bear to look at what they had done. Maybe they didn't understand the full magnitude of it until that moment. But for everyone else, the truth was undeniable. Deserae had lived through something that should have killed her, and she had done it with grace, courage, and a will that refused to break. As the trial continued, psychologists testified about the boys' mental states. They said there were signs of detachment, impulsivity, and emotional immaturity, but nothing could justify the act. They had planned it, executed it, and left her for dead. The jury listened to hours of testimony, looked at photos, read transcripts of the text messages, and watched the police interviews. The image that emerged was chilling. Not two boys who lost control, but two individuals who had made a deliberate choice to harm someone who trusted them. When closing arguments began, the prosecutor's voice carried through the courtroom with quiet intensity. "For $55 and an iPod," he said, "they nearly ended a young girl's life. $55. Think about that. Think about the value of a human life in their minds." The room was still. The parents of the defendants sat motionless, tears running down their faces. The pain was universal now, no longer confined to one family. It had spread through every person who had touched this story. Deserae's parents sat holding hands, their eyes never leaving the prosecutor. They knew no sentence could give their daughter back what she had lost, but they also knew that justice mattered, accountability mattered. And if sharing her story meant protecting another child from the same fate, then they would tell it as many times as needed. As the first trial day ended, the sky outside the courthouse turned gold with evening light. Reporters gathered on the steps, their voices blending with the sound of traffic passing by. Inside, the halls were quiet, and somewhere, in a hospital therapy room across town, Deserae was practicing standing on her own 2 feet, one shaky step at a time. The courtroom's final day felt heavy, as though everyone knew the air itself was waiting for the verdict. Weeks of testimony had built to this moment. The jurors sat still, faces tense, aware that whatever decision they made would echo for years through the lives of everyone in that room. Reporters filled the back rows, their pens ready, their cameras waiting to capture a single expression: relief, anger, grief, anything that would tell the story of justice finally being served. When the judge entered, the murmurs stopped instantly. The defendants, the two teenage boys, stood as instructed. They looked pale, uncertain, as if they were only just realizing how far they had fallen. For so long, they had seemed detached, even cold. But now there was a flicker of fear in their eyes. Not for what they did done, but for what was coming next. The judge's voice was calm, measured, but behind it lay the weight of something unspoken. That this was not just a punishment, but a reminder that even the young can bear the full responsibility of their choices. The verdict came down like a quiet thunder. Guilty on all major counts: attempted murder, aggravated robbery, obstruction of justice. The words echoed through the courtroom, landing heavily in the air. One of the boys broke down, tears running freely, his shoulders shaking. The other stood motionless, staring straight ahead. It was over. There was no going back. The sentence would come later, but for the community, this moment was the closure they had waited for. The idea that justice, however imperfect, could still find its way through the pain. Outside, Desiree's parents faced a crowd of microphones once again. The cameras captured their faces, not with triumph, but with quiet exhaustion. "There are no winners here," her mother said softly. "We're grateful for justice, but we've lost something that can never be replaced. And so have they." Her words carried something powerful, the recognition that even in victory, tragedy leaves behind nothing but ruin. Inside, Deserae was not present that day. Her parents had decided it was too much for her to see. Instead, she spent the afternoon at therapy, pushing herself through another round of exercises. Each movement was a battle, standing, walking, forming words again. But that day, when her therapist told her the verdict, she smiled for the first time in weeks. "Good," she whispered. It wasn't revenge. It was peace, a small piece of it. Fragile, but real. Over the months that followed, Desiree's recovery became a story that spread far beyond Utah. News outlets across the country covered her progress, showing videos of her taking her first steps, relearning to write her name, returning to school. She became a living message of perseverance. People wrote her letters from around the world, strangers who told her that her courage had changed how they saw their own struggles. In a world where darkness so often dominated headlines, she had become a rare light. But behind the public attention, the private battle continued. There were nights filled with nightmares, days when frustration brought tears, moments when she questioned why she had survived at all. Her parents were her anchor. Her friends, too, slowly returned, unsure at first how to act around her, but finding strength in her resilience. Teachers described her as determined, focused, never bitter. When she spoke, her words carried depth far beyond her years. Years later, when Deserae finally addressed the public again, she stood on a stage, a little unsteady, but radiant. Her speech was short and simple. "I'm not the same person I was," she said, "but I'm stronger. What happened to me doesn't define me. What I do next does." The crowd rose to their feet in applause, some in tears. It wasn't pity. It was admiration. She had turned pain into purpose. Meanwhile, the story of the two boys faded slowly from the news. They remained behind bars, serving long sentences, their names remembered mostly in connection to their crime. Occasionally, journalists would mention them in updates about Deserae's progress, but the focus was no longer on what they had done. It was on what she had become. Time has a way of rearranging stories, and in this one, the villains were overshadowed by the survivor. Still, questions lingered. People in the town often asked each other, how did this happen? How could two young teenagers decide that a friend's life was worth only a few dollars and a gadget? Psychologists debated whether it was peer pressure, immaturity, or something far darker. A lack of empathy that no one had noticed until it was too late. The case became part of a larger national conversation about youth violence, mental health, and the frightening ease with which access to weapons can turn childish anger into tragedy. In classrooms and courtrooms across the country, Deserae's story was told as both a warning and an inspiration. Teachers discussed it in ethics classes. Police officers mentioned it during community safety talks. And every time her name was mentioned, it was not as a victim, but as a survivor, someone who had faced the absolute worst of humanity and still chosen to live. One local reporter, reflecting on the case years later, said, "That story changed the town forever. People lock their doors now. They watch their kids more closely." But they also talk more about kindness, about noticing pain before it turns to violence. Maybe that was the legacy no one expected. That from so much senseless cruelty could come a reminder of empathy. And for Deserae, that was enough. She didn't want to be remembered for the moment she was shot. She wanted to be remembered for what came after. For the way she stood again, spoke again, smiled again. In her own quiet way, she turned her suffering into a message for others. That survival isn't just about living through something, but about choosing to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it gets. That canal, once a place of horror, eventually became a site of remembrance. Each year, on the anniversary of the attack, friends and strangers alike would leave flowers by the water. They didn't come to mourn. They came to honor, to remind themselves that darkness exists, but so does resilience. That evil can strike anywhere, but so can hope. And in that stillness, the wind would move across the surface of the water, carrying with it the memory of a girl who refused to be defined by her pain. Time has a strange way of folding pain into memory. For Deserae Turner, the months after the verdict were not about forgetting what happened, but about finding meaning in the fragments that were left. The world had already labeled her a medical herbivore, a title that followed her everywhere in news stories, interviews, and the whispers of people who saw her in town. But behind that label was a girl still trying to rediscover herself, to understand why she had survived when everything suggested she shouldn't have. In the quiet of her room, the sound of medical machines had been replaced by the rhythmic tapping of her pencil against paper. Writing became her therapy. Sometimes it was just a few sentences, reminders, goals, thoughts that floated up when the world outside grew too loud. "You're still here. You still matter." One page read in uneven handwriting. Every word was a step forward. Proof that even damaged hands could still create something beautiful. Her family remained her foundation. Her father, who rarely cried before the shooting, became the one who would wipe away her tears before his own. Her mother, strong and steady, often said that Desiree's strength gave her the courage to keep going. In the Turner household, laughter slowly returned, timid at first, then louder, freer. But the shadow of that February afternoon never disappeared completely. It lingered in the spaces between words, in the sudden silence when someone mentioned the boys' names. At school, her return was nothing short of extraordinary. Classmates greeted her with hugs, gifts, and tears. Teachers cried when she walked back into class. Some couldn't even believe she wanted to return to the same place that reminded her of so much pain. But Deserae had a reason. "If I don't go back," she told her parents, "then they win." She refused to let fear dictate her future. And so, she walked through those doors, head held high, her gait slow but steady, every step an act of quiet defiance. Her presence changed the atmosphere of the school. Where there had once been gossip and curiosity, there was now respect. Her peers, many of them still processing how two of their own could commit such a terrible act, found themselves reevaluating what friendship and trust truly meant. Teachers noticed it to a newfound gentleness among students, a pause before words that could hurt. Trauma had reshaped their community in subtle ways. Local news stations began to feature Desiree's story as one of inspiration rather than tragedy. Reporters followed her journey, capturing moments of progress, her walking and speaking in front of her class, even attending a local charity event. Each update carried a sense of awe. Audiences who had once watched her story with sorrow now watched with admiration. The headline that once read "Teen Girls Shot in Hedebol Dinto, Survivor Inspires Thousands with Her Strength." And in that transformation, Deserae reclaimed ownership of her story. But privately, recovery remained a daily battle. There were mornings she woke up with headaches so sharp they blurred her vision. Days when fatigue made it impossible to concentrate. Moments when frustration boiled into tears because her hands wouldn't move the way they used to. Her scars, both visible and invisible, reminded her of what she'd lost, but she also learned to see them differently. "They're not ugly," she once told her therapist. "They're just proof that I survived." Social media became another outlet for her healing. Deserae began sharing parts of her journey online. Small videos, motivational messages, Photos of her progress. Her followers grew quickly, drawn not by pity, but by admiration. Her captions often carried a simple truth, written in her voice. No matter what life takes from you, there's always something left to give. The messages she received in return were filled with gratitude. People from across the world told her that her strength had given them hope during their own battles. Concerts or Bibors victims of abuse, soldiers recovering from injury. Somehow, her story had reached far beyond the quiet neighborhoods of Utah. Years later, Deserae began speaking publicly. At first, it was small. A local school assembly, a church youth group, a charity fundraiser. Each time, her voice trembled a little less. Her message was not about revenge or fear. It was about resilience, forgiveness, and the power of choosing to move forward. We can't control what happens to us, she would tell audiences, but we can control what we do with it. Her words resonated deeply. In a society so often consumed by tragedy, here was someone who had lived through it and still chosen light. Her story also became a catalyst for change. Schools in Utah and beyond began implementing stronger safety programs and peer counseling initiatives. Local authorities worked with educators to identify early signs of isolation and aggression in students, the kinds of red flags that might prevent another tragedy like hers. In interviews, police officers would mention her case as a reminder of how quickly teenage impulsivity can spiral into irreversible violence. Her pain, though unimaginable, had sparked awareness that could save others. Even with a growing recognition, Deserae remained humble. She still spent her evenings at home with her family, watching movies, playing board games, and occasionally laughing about the irony that she, of all people, was being called an influencer. "I just tell my story," she said in one interview. "If it helps someone, then that's enough." There was no bitterness in her tone, only acceptance. But there was one part of her story she rarely spoke about: the night of the shooting. When asked about it, she would pause, look away, and simply say, "That's not who I am anymore." It wasn't avoidance. It was her way of refusing to let that moment define her. In her mind, she had already moved beyond the canal, beyond the fear, into a life rebuilt on courage and grace. In the end, Deserae Turner became more than just a survivor. She became a symbol, not of what had been taken, but of what could never be destroyed. Her spirit, her kindness, her unyielding determination to live fully despite everything. The story that had begun in violence was now a testament to renewal, and somewhere, beneath the soft Utah sky, the wind carried her words like a whisper. To anyone still struggling in the dark, you are stronger than you think. Keep going. As the years moved forward, the rhythm of life in Smithfield began to change. The town that had once been defined by tragedy slowly began to heal, and with that healing came a deeper sense of unity. The community, once shaken by fear and disbelief, began to rebuild around compassion. Schools started new programs focused on empathy and communication, encouraging students to speak openly about their struggles rather than hiding behind silence. Teachers, parents, and counselors worked together to make sure that no child ever slipped through the cracks again. And though Deserae's story remained the most haunting reminder of what could happen when kindness was replaced with cruelty, it also became the spark that inspired hope. Deserae herself had found a new rhythm as well. By her late teens, she had grown more confident in her voice, not just as a survivor, but as an advocate. She began speaking regularly at high schools, church gatherings, and community events, each time delivering the same quiet message of endurance and gratitude. "It's not about what you've lost," she would tell the crowds. "It's about what you still have and what you can still give." Her words were never rehearsed, but they carried the kind of truth that only someone who had lived through darkness could express. People who saw her speak often described her presence as disarming, calm, gentle, and grounded. There was no anger, no vengeance, only a quiet certainty that forgiveness was a strength, not a weakness. When she talked about the boys who had hurt her, she didn't dwell on their cruelty. "I forgave them," she said once in an interview. "Not for them, but for me. Holding hate inside doesn't heal you. Letting go does." Those words echoed across television screens and online clips, touching millions who had never even heard of Smithfield before. In the years that followed, Desiree's journey became a symbol of what human resilience could look like. Universities invited her to speak at leadership conferences. Mental health organizations sought her voice to help raise awareness about youth violence and recovery. What had once been a horrific news headline was now a lesson in courage. People saw her not as a victim, but as living proof that even the most unimaginable pain can lead to transformation. Her parents, meanwhile, watched her evolution with both pride and awe. They had once feared they might lose their daughter entirely, not just to death, but to despair. Yet here she was, standing in front of hundreds, her voice steady and sure. "She taught us how to live again," her father said in one local interview. "We thought we were protecting her, but really, she was the one giving us strength." Despite the recognition, Deserae never let fame define her, away from cameras and microphones. She lived quietly, spending afternoons with her younger siblings, helping her mother in the kitchen, feeding her horse, and finding peace in the simple things. The farm, with its wide open spaces and gentle rhythm, became her sanctuary. Every sunrise felt like another small victory, a reminder that life had continued when it so easily could have ended. Yet, in quiet moments, the memories still surfaced. The cold February air, the sound of water trickling in the canal, the blinding flash of pain before everything went dark. These recollections didn't haunt her the way they once had, but they lived inside her like old scars, reminders, not wounds. She learned to honor them without letting them consume her. "My scars aren't ugly," she once said in the public talk. "They tell my story, and I'm still writing it." The more Deserae spoke, the more she noticed how many people were silently fighting their own battles. After her talks, students would approach her, some with tears, some with trembling voices, to share their own stories of bullying, trauma, or hopelessness. She listened to every one of them. Sometimes, all she said in response was, "You're not alone." It was enough. Her compassion became contagious, rippling outward into the lives of those who needed it most. Local schools began inviting her to collaborate on peer support programs, where older students could mentor younger ones. She worked alongside counselors to develop workshops focused on empathy, conflict resolution, and emotional awareness. The initiative grew quickly, and within a year, surrounding towns had adopted similar programs. Smithfield, once the backdrop of a nightmare, had become a model for healing and reform. As she approached adulthood, Deserae also began to think about her future beyond speaking. She expressed interest in studying psychology or counseling, fields that would allow her to turn her experience into lifelong service. "If I can help even one person feel like their life is worth living," she said, "then everything I went through will mean something." Her words reflected the same unwavering optimism that had guided her since the day she first opened her eyes in that hospital bed. On the anniversary of the attack, the town held a candlelight vigil near the canal, where everything had changed. Hundreds gathered, families, friends, teachers, and strangers. The air was cool and still, the water reflecting the soft flicker of candle flames. Deserae stood among them, quiet, surrounded by warmth and light. She didn't need to speak that night. Her presence said enough. Around her, people prayed, cried, and hugged each other, not in mourning, but in gratitude for life, resilience, and the reminder that even in the darkest places, hope can still grow. When the vigil ended, Deserae walked alone to the edge of the canal. The sound of the water was gentle, almost soothing. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered a simple thank you to life, to love, to whatever force had given her another chance. Then she turned back, toward the crowd, the soft glow of candles illuminating her smile. It was not the smile of someone who had forgotten, but of someone who had learned to live fully despite it all. There comes a point in every story when pain begins to fade into memory, and memory becomes something deeper. Legacy. For Deserae Turner, her legacy was not the moment she fell, but every single time she stood back up. Her name no longer echoed in whispers of tragedy. It carried in voices of strength. In classrooms and communities where her story reminded others that the human spirit could endure anything. What began as an act of unimaginable cruelty had, over time, transformed into a symbol of resilience. Years after the shooting, Deserae graduated high school. When she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, the entire auditorium stood and applauded. The clapping went on for nearly 2 minutes, a standing ovation not just for her achievement, but for her survival. Her teachers wiped away tears, her classmates cheered with pride, and for a brief moment, the pain of the past felt far away, replaced by something pure and hopeful. She smiled, that same quiet, steady smile that had become her signature, and raised her diploma as if to say, "I made it." She continued her journey into adulthood with a purpose that seemed to guide every step. Speaking engagements became more frequent. Universities, conferences, and national organizations invited her to share her experience and her message. She didn't rehearse her speeches. She simply spoke from the heart. Each time she took the stage, her words carried an authenticity that few could match. She wasn't a professional speaker. She was a living story, and that was what made people listen. Her talks often began with a soft pause, her voice calm, the room silent. "I'm not here because of what happened to me," she would say. "I'm here because of what I decided to do after." That line became her signature. It reminded people that strength isn't found in avoiding pain. It's found in choosing to live beyond it. Her story inspired countless others to face their own darkness head-on, whether it was grief, trauma, or loss. She taught them that healing wasn't about pretending the past never happened, but about building something meaningful in spite of it. In time, Deserae's advocacy expanded. She collaborated with organizations that focused on mental health awareness, youth violence prevention, and victim support. Her work helped secure funding for programs that gave young survivors access to therapy and rehabilitation resources. She even met with lawmakers to discuss policies related to juvenile sentencing and gun safety. Her voice, once silenced by violence, had become a tool for change, but despite her growing recognition, Deserae never lost her humility. She always found her way back home, to a quiet life surrounded by family, animals, and the open fields of Utah. There, she found balance, tending to her horses, reading by the window, and spending evenings watching the sun set behind the mountains. The simplicity of that life reminded her of everything she had fought for. Peace wasn't something that appeared overnight. It was something she built piece by piece, day by day. In interviews, she often reflected on the idea of forgiveness. People would ask her how she managed to forgive those who tried to take her life. Her answer was always the same: because I needed to be free. She understood that hate was another kind of prison, one that would have kept her chained to the worst moment of her life. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, it meant reclaiming her peace. And that, she believed, was the greatest victory of all. Over time, Deserae's story began to inspire not only those who knew her name, but also those who didn't. It became a touchstone for resilience across the world. Teachers used it in classrooms. Psychologists referenced it in studies on trauma recovery, and storytellers found in her journey the proof that hope could rise even from the bleakest places. Her message was universal. You can't choose what happens to you, but you can choose who you become after it. As the years passed, the story of that February afternoon in 2017 slowly transformed. It was no longer just about a brutal crime. It was about what came after, about community, compassion, and courage. It was about the ripple effect of one girl's decision to keep living. If you walked through Smithfield today, you'd never know it was once the site of such horror. The fields are quiet. The canal still runs gently under the sky, and children laugh nearby, unafraid, unaware. But somewhere, in the breeze that brushes across the water, there lingers the faint echo of a story that once changed everything. Not a story of death, but of survival. And when people speak Deserae's name now, they don't speak it with pity, they speak it with admiration. Because she showed the world that strength isn't about muscles or might S about grace under fire, and the will to choose kindness even after cruelty. Her final words, in one of her most watched speeches, captured that truth perfectly. She stood before a crowd of young students, her voice steady, her expression soft. "You will have moments in life that break you," she said. "Moments that make you question everything. But when they come, don't stop. Don't give in. You're more powerful than you think. You're more loved than you know. And even when life takes something from you, never forget, you can still build something beautiful with what's left." The audience rose in applause, some crying, others smiling, as the lights dimmed around her. In that moment, the story of Deserae Turner wasn't about the gun, or the betrayal, or the pain. It was about triumph. Quiet, steady, human triumph. And when the credits of her life story are written, they won't begin with tragedy. They'll begin with light, the kind that keeps burning long after the darkness fades. Because some stories don't end with sorrow. They end with strength. And Deserae's, against all odds, is one of them.